Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Ain't Gonna Be No Stupid, where we try to gain wisdom and understanding by listening to each other's stories. And hopefully, we can dispel some myths and be inspired. I'm here with my friend Jamie, and I met her at church last year. And then I saw her in the elevator of my building, and I'm like, what? And she's a neighbor of mine. So she's just a few floors up, and we're meeting today via Zoom. So please, Jamie, could you do a better job of introducing yourself than I could ever possibly do with all your titles and degrees and everything?
No, that was beautiful. I was like, that was like the best part, especially the part about how we ran into each other on the elevator. Like, what? I know you.
I know.
I love that.
Yes.
Yeah, so my name is Jamie Lewis. I've been attending City Church of Chicago for 4 years now, and that's where I met Amy. In my work life, I'm a palliative medicine physician at Rush University Medical Center with a focus in supportive oncology. I'm also a certified yoga instructor, and I teach staff, students, and patients in our cancer center. And a little bit on the side too, as I'm beginning to start my own yoga business and am training to become a yoga therapist.
Amazing. I know I wanted to clarify what oncology was for people, but you did that already. Cancer patients you work with.
Yes.
Do you also then we'll get into this later, but the yoga practice, is it also a preventative for cancer?
So it's more symptomatic, I would say.
Okay.
So it's been shown to help with cancer-related symptoms such as fatigue, generalized muscle aches and joint aches, sleep difficulties, cognitive dysfunction that can often be a result of like chemotherapy. So usually about 30 to 40% of patients can actually end up with chronic cognitive changes. So that memory loss, brain fog. So the yoga has been shown to help with those types of symptoms.
Wow. Wow. So that's why they call it restorative, probably, right?
Yes, to restore.
We're going to talk more
You know
about
me well, Amy. I'm all about the healing
Well, look
forms
at
of
you.
yoga.
I actually did a cup of tea today, and I normally don't drink tea, but I thought, I bet Jamie's going to bust out some tea. And then I lit a candle, and that never has happened.
Oh, it looks so zen.
That just reminded me. And then I even brought my yoga mat just to solidarity with you.
I love it. You're like a lot more zen in your household than in mine right now. It's like, because it's like, in my mind, it's like Saturday game day. So I'm like representing my alumni.
Doing your football marathons. I'm like,
right, getting ready for games.
The last thing I want is that noise of sports and I grew up with that every time you walked in a room, it'd be like sports. And I'm like, I moved, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. You mean that everybody listens to sports all the time? Freedom! I don't have to do that.
Right.
So, I respect it. I enjoy a good live game and everything. And I very much was an athlete through the years, and it paid for my college. So I'm not mad at sports.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm not mad at it, but it's almost like I just love, I sometimes catch myself sitting in silence all the time. Did you see that pause? And then I realize that sometimes I'll turn on the television for some like brain dead activity, but really, it really ruins my mojo of I really, really could go on a good silent retreat and not speak.
Oh, yes.
Lockdown has been great, right?
Yes.
But I want to start.
Stillness.
Yeah,
are great things.
Yes. I'm so inspired because we'll talk more about that later. But let's first start with what I always start with is like a ignorant, stupid story we thought was fine at the time, or we were a little kid and we really thought it was real, like true, or just something. It could have happened as recent as yesterday. You spell your name Jaime.
Mm-hmm.
Most Jamies spell it Jamie. When I was teaching in California, I was in a very highly Latino community, and I had a lot of Jaimes, right? So when I moved to Chicago in 2001, and then I got a teaching job in 2002, I walked into the school and a lot of white students, and I was like, what? I'm white, but I was like kind of freaked out by it, right? I'm like, oh, look, oh, hello, good morning. And then I go down the list when we did attendance, when you said everybody's name out loud. And I said, Jaime, and I looked up, and it's this little blonde girl. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. And I think there were 3 Jamie's on the list, but I was kept calling him Jaime, Jaime, Jaime. So that's one stupid story I have. If that didn't trigger anything, did anyone ever confuse your name like that through the years, or is that something that's been
Yes.
an issue?
Yeah, so I can actually tell the story that is like relevant to what we're going to be talking about. So my yoga mentor, she's been my mentor now for some years, and we originally met by when I decided I was going to take up yoga as a practice and self-care. Like I went online, I was like, I want to find like a teacher who kind of practices the type of yoga I'm looking into, who's open. I wanted a woman. And just like, it was like, those are pretty much the only thing, like characteristics I was looking for. And then for some reason, I think at the time I was like, I must have seen something on like one of those travel channels or National Geographic, but something that got me like, oh, Malta looks like a cool place. I want to go to Malta one day. I wonder if they do yoga in Malta. So I Google yoga teachers Malta, and like her page comes up because she's originally Maltese. And I'm like reading about her and her bio. And I was like, oh, she sounds pretty cool. So I email her and we're like, emailing back and forth to kind of set up stuff. And so when I get there, because of the way I spell my name, this whole time she thought I was going to be like a Hispanic male, a Latino male. So she comes and she like opens the door, or I open the door to like my hotel room and let her in, and she was like, hi. I was like, hi.
Wow.
And she didn't tell me until like a couple days later. She was like, I thought you were going to be a man.
That is hilarious. Oh, Jaime.
So yeah.
So tell me, you went to
And it was just already crazy of us going like, me going that far, because she was like, plus it was just so, she was like, it was just refreshing. She was like, some people would say crazy, but she was like, it was pretty refreshing that you were that trusting to come to like all the way to this island to practice yoga with someone you've never met in person.
That is brilliant. You did that last summer, last winter.
This was about, oh gosh, when did I meet her? 5 years ago, maybe? Yeah, she's been my mentor for some time.
I love that you, and I think I creeped on her page today on IG, and she had a cool digestive practice where she was pushing her fingers in her gut and bending into child's pose. It was
that sounds like her. Yeah, Michelle Bartolo.
Yep.
Her name.
You had thanked her on your new IG, and I was like, oh
yes,
man, this looks like a good one. It's like 9 minutes, 3 minutes of this and that, and I'm like, I need to probably do that. And then it was cool because she mentioned how she said she has digestive issues with sometimes the mind-body connection of how you digest what happens to you.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm like, oh man, I swear that was something that really spoke to me about digestion, like digest what happens to you. I'm not so sure my mind and body is as connected as it could be, but this practice also does that as well, right? It gets you back in your body. Like
exactly. That is what yoga is all about, getting you back into your body. It's a beautiful practice for that. Yeah. And it's funny you bring up the digestion part, because that was actually a series I did for one of our life groups. And, because I do the meditation life group for church.
Yes.
And we did a whole like series on like that. It was digest and awaken. So like not just like physical digestion, but more sensory digestion, because we did it kind of leading up into the election.
Oh, good.
So it's kind of like that month of chaos in like October, and just like all the madness is just like, how are we processing what we're taking in? Like there is a lot going on right now, and we must be mindful of how we're processing that, how we're seeing it, hearing it, using all of our senses, and then how we're digesting that within our body. And then how do we assimilate that to then move on and do what we need to do during the day? Are we assimilating it in a healthy manner? Or are we letting it, rot from the inside? How do you deal with that?
How do we assimilate? Like practical steps. I mean, we have still the situationship story to get into, which I'm going to talk about core power in a minute. But I want to know these, you mentioned the steps, like assimilating.
Yeah.
How do you digest?
So it's similar to how we choose what kind of physical food we take in. So if you're going to take in a lot of junk food, then what's going to happen to your body? Like, it's going to become unhealthy. It's going to become junk. You're not going to feel well. Yeah. Same thing with sensory food. If we're taking in a lot of the drama, the negative, the junk 24/7, what do you think that's going to be? Exactly. What that's going to do to your mind over time? It's like your mind and your heart are going to be full of junk. And so it's almost, you know, when you kind of like when we fast from like physical food, sometimes you have to fast from the like sensory negativity in order to just like cleanse your mind, your heart, and your spirit. So it's just being more mindful about what you're taking in. It's not saying you need to block out all of it, but you just need to be mindful of how much you take in.
Well, if you do think about it, we are in a situationship with COVID and also with our nation and where we're at with the transitioning of a president and everything, not to get political, but before we get into situationship, I can share with you one situationship I thought of, and it relates to the theme of what we're doing today. Core power yoga I tried down the street. Well, I used to do Bikram, and I have a poem I want to read later that I wrote about it. And but yet one time I went into core power because I think Bikram closed, and I hated it because it was something like I was in the midst of it was almost like a aerobics class / yoga class, and I was so stressed out, and I thought about I couldn't do certain poses, and then I looked to my right, looked to my left, and they're all doing it all perfectly. And I remember thinking, this is how my students feel when they walk into something like, say, they don't feel comfortable writing or reading. And I'm just like, and forgetting that where everybody's coming in, you know, what place that is. So I know that they follow like different principles, right? It's not a restorative yoga practice.
Oh, goodness, no.
Okay, good. I'm glad. Oh, good. I mean, my discernment was good. Now, so can you think of like, we talked about this earlier, like, do you find that you became a doctor hoping to help people, and then you're kind of in a place where, wow, this isn't really everything I always thought it would be? And so it's sort of like a situationship. Like our careers can be that. We do go in with the right intention, and then we get a little frustrated where our mind and body aren't connecting because we are not, we're frustrated with the system. So I don't know if you want to talk more about your journey as a doctor.
Of course, yeah. That was, yes, disappointment. That was a great word for that. So I would say the quick and dirty version of kind of my journey. So basically, like, I had gone straight through with like school and training since like kindergarten. So I like never had a break, first of all. Like went from until I got like my first job at my first big girl job at age 30, I had been going straight through. That is not, so these days with medical students, that is actually pretty uncommon, which I just love to see. Like I also mentor medical students, and it's so refreshing to see that all of the ones in my group, 27 first year medical students, every single one of them took at least a year off between college and med school, at least a year. Some were taking several years to do other things and pursue other like trainings or just like get other job experience. And it's just so amazing to see, because now they come into med school much mature, and like they're just able to handle the stress. So having said that, like that is uncommon these days, but back when I was in med school, that was pretty common to just go straight through. So needless to say, I burnt out. And I just I hit the ground running my like first year as an attending physician in palliative medicine. And probably like halfway through the year, I was like, ooh, yeah, I'm not gonna make it. Like we need to do something else that's going to restore me, especially in this type of work with palliative medicine. Like it wasn't so much just like seeing a bunch of people during the day and then being like physically drained. You're mentally, emotionally drained. Like it's another kind of work. Like I was used to like 30-hour shifts and seeing like multiple patients, like a large volume of patients. This was a different kind of work. Like it's heavy. You are all up in people's stuff, and people got a lot of stuff these days. So just being, and then you're dealing with their family stuff. And then you also have to deal with the doctors around you who are maybe struggling to deal with that patient stuff. And then they come to you in palliative, like, help, I'm also struggling. So not only do we exist to kind of help support families and patients, but often like other doctors as well, and then our own team members. So it's a lot of just humanness that you're having to deal with. And then that's where I struggled. So I was just like, I need to find a way to stay refreshed and restored in this practice. And that's what led me to yoga. So it actually, most people come to yoga for some type of physical aspect. They want to get flexible, they want to get the yoga butt going on or something like that. Like it's usually something, right? The arms, like it's usually something superficial and physical. But,
oh, trust me, I would like the arms. I don't care if you call me superficial.
So like for me, it was like, while the agility part, yes, was appealing for me because I'm not flexible. So I love when people say, I can't do yoga because I'm not flexible. I'm like, hey, I'm a yoga instructor. I'm not flexible either. Like I was doing stuff like I was into boxing. So I came into yoga with just like horrible, like shoulder flexibility, like strong shoulders, but essentially probably weakened shoulders because they were so tightened and had lost their agility. Wow. So there's this, that's getting into another story. That's the yoga therapy and me coming out. But so like I came into it a little bit for the agility, but really for that like mental, emotional balance piece that I knew that it could give me. Like I needed to find something that could ground me. And like while boxing and running and weightlifting are great to just like sweat it out and sometimes help, relax you in a different way, yoga was more about it brings more of a wholeness aspect into the practice. So even if you're going into it for one reason, it can't help but to nourish you in all those other realms. So it's going to help you physically, mentally, emotionally, energetically, spiritually. Like it starts to work the layers, even if you didn't go into it for that reason. And that's what's so beautiful about the practice. And there was actually a survey on this, I think like in US News World Report some years ago, about why, like asking yoga practitioners what brought them to yoga. And like the first few reasons were something physical or something superficial. But then when they asked them what kept them practicing yoga, the reasons flipped. And the first few reasons were more for that spiritual aspect that it brought out, that curiosity about their own divine nature, that mental, emotional balance. So it like dug deep into like those other layers of us as humanists. That's what I loved about the practice. And that's what I needed. So that's what brought me to it, because I was just like, I need something to ground. I'm like depleted. I'm just like, I'm becoming ungrounded. And, if I'm ungrounded, like I'm not going to be able to help my patients who are struggling with like severe illnesses. I can't help them get grounded. Whole physicians need to help people become whole, help their patients become whole. So I needed that. So that's what brought me there. And it worked for some time, but it's still, I still became compassion fatigued. I wouldn't say I really burned out. I would say it really was more compassion fatigue that led me to take my leave. So then I did take a leave for 6 months, the first half of 2018, which is crazy. I can't believe it's coming up on 3 years that I took my leave. Time's been flying. So 6 months, and I basically put all my stuff in storage, and I left with the mindset that I wasn't sure if I was coming back to medicine, to Rush, to palliative care, to Chicago. Like I was like, I don't know, like we're gonna put my stuff in storage. I just need to like leave and think. I call it a sabbatical. It technically wasn't a sabbatical. For those of you who don't know what a sabbatical is, like you get paid for a sabbatical.
Right. You took a leave.
So like
your job.
Right. To build upon skills for that job. I didn't get paid for this. It was more of I left. Wow. I was like, I'm leaving. It was a planned leave, but I was like, I need to leave because I just need to take care of myself.
Where did you go?
So I started with my yoga mentor in Tulum, Mexico. And usually we would go to Mexico for our trainings together. So I met with her, which was great because she's lived a nomad life most of her life. So it just felt very safe for me to start with her, because I was like, I kind of like freaked out for a moment, like, what did you just do? Like, you don't have any of your stuff, you have nowhere to go, you have nowhere to live.
Wow.
You're just out here. So it was nice to start with someone who's lived, a traveling life for most of her life. So I hopped around Mexico, then went to New Zealand, Australia, Peru, and then finished in Vancouver, Canada, where I did my yoga teacher certification. And that was I didn't know I was going to do that. Like, I didn't know where I was going to end up. So that was kind of a surprise that, I did end up becoming certified as a teacher. So yeah.
That is really
and then,
amazing.
About halfway through, I knew I was coming back to Chicago.
So when you were traveling to New Zealand, Australia, and all, were you also doing intentional yoga stuff, or you were just like free bird, relaxing, vacationing, soul searching?
It was more, I would say it was more purposeful vacationing. So I would sightsee and tour. I did the tourist thing everywhere I went, but it really was like days of yoga, meditation, devotional, prayer. Like, I had my routine in the morning where usually the first few hours of the day were spent doing those things. And then I would sightsee and tour for a while, and then come back and do more yoga, devotional, meditation, prayer. And that was basically my 6 months.
Wow. Well, let me get into this then, because I know, like, we talked about this, and I want you to help clarify some things. With some people believe in the Christian world that yoga is praying to false gods. So stay away from it at all costs. And I've experienced some of your meditation and yoga, and it's nowhere near that. And it was really enlightening and surprising and wonderful the way you roll as a leader in this medium. So talk to the people out there about this.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you're able to take part in that. Yeah, so that is a common myth, that yoga is looked at as a religion, or it's considered to be a religion, or it's certain styles of yoga specifically are often considered to be, or involve, I should say, like praying to certain gods, like you said, or even evoking certain energies. That when you're dealing with energy generally, that can be scary for people because you can't see it. So if I can't, the Western mindset is like, if I can't see it, then I'm gonna be a little nervous about it. And so it's like, there's this mentality, or say stigma, that yes, like if you're invoking certain energies or just hearing that word invoking anything, it can be a little intimidating. So when I'm describing, or I'll give the example of when I'm teaching yoga for my patients, for example, or even telling patients about yoga, like I will openly like dispel like some of the myths. Like, there's a myth that people think it's a religion. It's not a religion. It's not even going to be, I would say it's not even going to be even utilizing like a specific deity of any sort. Now, having said that, in yoga philosophy, when you look at kind of how, not to turn this into a history lesson, but just when you go through your teacher training, you actually do have to learn a lot about the tradition of yoga. I mean, we're dealing with like a 5,000 plus year practice. Okay. So a lot of the traditions of yoga were actually originally passed down orally. And so a lot of like a lot of things, one, get lost in translation when you're trying to pass something down orally and then put it into a written language and then put it into other languages. So you have to be mindful sometimes of that when you're translating things. It may not translate in a way that's comfortable for a lot of people. So when I'm teaching students, really when I teach like any student, staff, even in the community or with my patients, I'm not using Sanskrit language, which is what the languages that a lot of the yoga poses are going to be in. And you actually see that pretty commonly in yoga therapy specifically. And yoga therapy is just like the professional application of like yoga principles and yoga philosophy. You're working with clients who have like real medical and mental health issues. So you're not using these Sanskrit words. So I'm not going to say something like Tadasana. I'm going to say mountain pose or standing pose or something like that. It still gets the same benefits across and people are going to be a lot more welcoming to it. Same thing when I'm teaching meditation. A lot of times people have their own thoughts about meditation. The way I practice meditation, yes, I do combine it with my faith. It's part of my prayer ritual in the morning. That doesn't have to be the case for everybody. Like nature could be what inspires you. Nature could be your source of divinity. And that's okay. So it's really kind of getting more, like we said at the very beginning, like just getting people more into their bodies and recognizing that if you do believe in this divine nature of some sort, so we're not saying a specific God or religion, but if you just believe in divinity itself, yoga is about helping you recognize that divine nature within you and that divine nature within everyone else that you come across. And ultimately, that brings you to this peace and mindset that we're all one in this world. The same divine that's in me is the same divine that's in you, and you, and you.
That if you think about it, like the interconnectivity of humanity, right? It's like if we really look at each other from as children of God, like even that if we are made in His image, that whole divine self is what you're talking about, right? We are connected to the source, to the Creator, and I don't see anything threatening about that.
Exactly, and it's funny because I would see the same thing. There's a lot of crossover between my yoga practice and teachings and palliative medicine. It's really interesting, but we see the same thing. One, I deal with myths every day about what it is I do in palliative medicine. They're like, oh, you're the people who only give pain meds, or you're here because they're like, oh my gosh, am I dying? Is that why they called you? I'm like, no, did somebody tell you were dying? I'm not here to tell you you were dying. Like every day I'm dispelling myths or debunking myths about what it is I do. Same thing with yoga and yoga therapy. But then also like in palliative medicine, we often function as like an interdisciplinary team. So we have social workers and chaplains, especially. And so a lot of times people will think that because they are maybe agnostic or atheist, they're like, oh, I don't need the chaplain. It's like, no, the chaplain sees everyone. Like they hear chaplain and they think like, oh, I'm not Catholic.
Right. I'm not dying.
Right.
I don't need my last right.
Like, no, that's actually not what they're there for. And especially in the realm of end of life care, there's a lot of existential issues that come up that chaplains are actually the best people to work through those issues with. Like, why did this happen to me? Like, that's an existential issue. Like, you don't need to believe in a certain God to have that question pop into your head and want to talk about it. Or, hey, like, I'm concerned about, now I've never believed before, but now I believe like all the things I did wrong in the past. I think I got this disease because of everything I did in the past. Like, those are existential issues beyond, religion. Like, it doesn't have to just be about religion. And that's what the chaplain has with as well. So just, I see that crossover. It's kind of interesting to talk to people about and explore.
Well, you truly are a chaplain on the earth as well, too, with what you do in medicine and what you're doing now with your yoga practice. So that is really cool. And you mentioned compassion fatigue. Is that
Yes.
considered that are you an empath as they define it in the world as well?
Right. So I am an empath, but compassion fatigue is more about um, it's used more in fields where people are generally, yes, considered to have to be giving a lot of compassion. So it's not just necessarily doctors and nurses. It could be pastors and preachers. It could be teachers, like right? Yes.
I have it.
So,
Yeah.
and it's more about when you are getting, it's that mental, a lot of the symptoms kind of cross over or overlap, I'd say, with burnout syndrome. But the key is there's a lot of mental and emotional fatigue with it. And I would say the key difference with burnout and like compassion fatigue is that you can still do your work. Generally, people who are compassion fatigued aren't compromising patient care in the medical world. Whereas burnout syndrome, the concern is that the symptoms get to be so debilitating, you may actually start making mistakes on the job.
Oh.
And then it affects,
So there
patient
should be
care.
a mandatory sabbaticals given, don't you think?
Wouldn't that be great in this country?
Right? Seriously.
Man, that would be so wonderful. Oh my goodness.
I know, I'm always all full of ideas that are never going to happen, but let me read my poem if I can.
Perfect.
Yoga is like writing. You just need to get out of bed and get in the ready position. Though it can be painful and messy, it's still invigorating. When you reach the final draft, return to your breathing. Touch your forehead to your knee. Pulling is the object of stretching. Follow my instructions. Pose hasn't begun until your knee is solid. Lock your knee, lock your knee, lock your knee. Oh, shaky leg. Dandayamana.
Dandayamana Janu Sharasana.
My nemesis. Shucks. Will I ever get that pose? Stay in your lane. It's not the doing, but the being that matters. Just show up, do your personal best, and don't look around. Give yourself a smile. Everyone's journey is different. Exert and rest. Push and relax. Push and rest. Savasana, corpse pose, my fave. Even though I almost drowned in my nostril sweat today, while upside down in Sasangan.
Oh.
Sasangasana.
I was like, is that our Sashangasana?
Yeah, Sashangasana in 150-degree yoga. It felt so good to work so hard when it's all over. An energizing feeling envelops me as toxins flee, yet I must return to that torture chamber tomorrow. I must. Namaste. That I wrote during hot yoga because I know that's a total practice than what you do, correct?
I love it. Yeah. So yeah, that's
I don't do
not generally a style of yoga I'm recommending to anybody
I hear you.
in my patients at all.
I hear you.
Completely different, yes. But I just love that. I mean, everything you said though was what yoga really is about.
Push,
And
pull.
what's great about, well, like the fact that it's a process. It's about being, not doing. And it's about finding that balance of ease and stability. So that's where that softness and strength come into play.
Oh, I heard something recently.
Balance.
Enter the world with a strong spine, but an open front or an open heart. You just reminded me.
Ooh,
You just said that.
Yeah.
Because it's like
good.
sometimes we come into the world or relationships and we're like this, right?
Right.
But you can still have a spine, boundaries, right? And keep an open heart.
Right.
Still working on the open heart part, but we'll get there.
So, it's a process.
Yes.
It's a process.
So you want to do some rapid
Anything
fire?
worth it is a process.
Exactly. You want to do some rapid fire questions?
Love it.
Okay.
Do it.
What's your favorite?
How quickly I can think.
Yeah, right. What is your favorite summer activity?
Ooh, we'll see how I don't like summer. Wearing rompers.
Oh, yes. You have some yoga on your Instagram. You have some of those cute rompers. You're working your team in yoga. That's awesome.
Right.
Oh my gosh. If I wore rompers, I would get even bigger, because just like, nobody can see it. Oh, where is the worst place you could get stuck? It could be physically, emotionally, mentally.
Ooh, guilt.
Mm, that's good.
Gotta let that go.
Especially when you're not guilty. Like sometimes we,
Right.
you know what I mean? It's like we feel
Right.
shame for something we didn't do, for some
Right.
societal expectation on us, right?
Right.
What's the most interesting thing you have in your purse, wallet, bag?
Ooh. I mean, oh, well, right now I do have a University of Tennessee face mask.
Somebody
my
sent it.
financial advisor is based in Memphis, and he like sent face masks to all his clients, all his doctor clients. I was like, "What is this?" when I opened it, and then I was like, "Oh, it's from Jim."
Oh,
like,
that's
how dare he?
hilarious. Are you gonna wear it?
No, I've been meaning to give it to somebody. And it's
That's
just been
hilarious.
hanging out in my purse.
That is good that you brought that up. That's so funny. So look, why don't we then close with, if you can, a 3, 2, 1 while we're at it.
Love it.
3, it could be either 3 books that you recommend, or 3 practices you recommend, or 3 questions you want us to think about, but it's a 3, 2, 1. So you decide what the 3 are if you want, or I can just tell you.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's see. Like my three phrases generally, and this is coming from just my own Christian faith. I say it as an order. Love God, love yourself, love others.
Oh, that's so good. I like how you put yourself.
That's the order. Like when you start messing up the order,
yep,
you mess up, life just gets messy. That's my 3.
That's good. Love that you have that already.
Yes, that's my 3. My 2. My 2 would be probably the 2 were, if I had to describe yoga in 2 words, it's finding that ease and stability.
Ooh, yes.
And that's not just in the body, but in the mind, in the heart, in the spirit. Yes. Yeah. So my 2 words of yoga, ease and stability.
And then it could be like a question you want us to think about, or a challenge you have for us, or one book we need to read, or whatever you got.
Yes. Ooh, I like the one challenge. The challenge question. Yes, because I've been thinking about that. Oh, good. So the challenge question is something that because we kind of were talking about work and stuff kind of along this way. And this was something I thought of last night, actually, something I was reading. I was like, what would it look like to leave your job or your work every day fuller than when you arrived?
Yes,
I feel like that would be true joy in work.
That's true. I love that. And bigger rather than drained.
And depleted and exhausted. I was like, that would be amazing. Like, what would that look like? That's the challenge question.
Well, do we accomplish that by putting God first, then ourselves first, and then others? I almost think it circles back to your 3. Because if you put we aren't going to be drained if we put ourselves first or put God first.
Right.
Because we're using his strength to feed ourselves, and then the drainage should not happen. Ooh,
right. Because he constantly renews. He's continually refilling us. So that's so true.
And if we humble ourselves or actually feel the need for him, right? Because I don't know if he'll fill us if we want him to. He's not going to pour it into us if we don't ask, right? That's another principle. He's a gentleman. He's like, okay, if you want it.
Yes. God does not push himself on you. Exactly. He's such a gentleman in that way. Yeah.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, Jamie, where can we find you? So if we want to join some of your virtual yoga practice.
Yes. So you can find me on Instagram, Jamie. So it's like Jaime, like Amy said earlier, Jamie_MD Yogi. And on my bio, there's a link where you can go and find my article on yoga for cancer-related symptoms, the link to sign up for my newsletter. It's a monthly newsletter with weekly updates for my classes, which right now I'm teaching yin yoga classes on Sunday nights virtually.
Amazing. And you have a really good IG page too, where like you did a gratitude challenge that I thought was amazing.
Yeah.
That was really, I didn't start it yet because I've always been a
Oh,
believer
yeah.
of that, but I think I need to tangibly put it on a notebook. So thank you.
Yeah, it's fun to do. 10
Yeah.
days, 55 reasons of gratitude.
Good. So good. It's like a 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Is that how you do? Or you start with one?
Or start day one thing, day two things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then you get 55
And then
after 10 days.
55 reasons.
That will change your life right there, just in and of itself, right?
Yep. To see
Oh,
how beautiful your life is already.
see?
Awesome. Love it. Bye, Amy. Thank you.